Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack 4 Business Podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
So, from the audience perspective, why does your business still feel so chaotic, no matter how hard you work? That's the question our guest will be diving into today. If you're a creative entrepreneur or small business owner who's constantly juggling too much, feeling overwhelmed, or stuck in the weeds, this one's for you. Marjorie helps businesses like yours move from burnout and messy back ends to clarity, control through simple, soulful systems. Our guest today is Marjorie Gutierrez from Smart Business Designs. Marjorie is a true global entrepreneur whose journey was oddly foretold at the age of 10 during a childhood palm reading. She was told she'd travel the world, learn languages, and immerse herself in diverse cultures. And that's exactly what she's done. From her early days selling baked goods to managing fine art shipping operations between London and New York, Marjorie has always had a gift for turning chaos into clarity. Known as a firefighter in a business suit, she spent over 20 years solving problems, leading teams, and discovering that strong systems are the secret to business success. In 2019, she founded Smart Business Designs to help creative entrepreneurs and small business owners simplify, streamline, and scale with confidence. Marjorie, it is a pleasure to have you here today. Great.
Excited to be here.
And
Hi, everyone. I'm Marjorie from Smart Business Designs, and the quote is, very important for me, building a business is simple, but not easy. Steve Jobs. That always sticks to me when I speak to anyone.
so I understand you dodged the proverbial bullet, so to speak, in Mexico. What was that story about?
I was working late one evening and I was walking. I was trying to contemplate, do I take the metro or what do I do? And all of a sudden I was grabbed by unmarked taxi. And I knew right away, as soon as they heard me, they would know I'm foreign. So I had to come up with a plan. I didn't speak until I had my story in my head. They were trying to get my PIN number, which I didn't have. And eventually I told them to stop threatening me and start negotiating. I can buy them things, but no cash. And that's what happened. I kept telling them, speak properly. I can't understand you. I took over and they asked me to buy huge televisions. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And they were like, why not? Well, I can't carry them. Has to be small. And they were like, oh, yeah, you're right. And $10,000 later, yep, I got home safely.
At age 10, how did you getting your hand right? That's an interesting genesis. Someone says, you're going to be doing this. What's the backstory behind that?
My sister had a friend whose father was an ambassador in India. She was brought up by an old nanny who knew how to read poems. My sister and I overheard it, and I said, I want my poem to be read. She said, but you're too young. I said, never mind, I still want it. And when she read my poem, I was like, oh no, I don't want to be a flight stewardess. I want to be a businesswoman. And that's what stayed with me for a long time. Then I forgot about it. Until 20 years later, I remember what she told me. And yes, it happened. I moved to the UK, lived in Mexico, lived in the US, traveled everywhere. I grew up in Switzerland, stayed in many countries, many cities, learned languages, and it's made me who I am now.
I
think what happened is when I moved to Mexico on an adventure, I started teaching English. That's what every foreigner does, either teach English or work for an English newspaper. And then I worked with executives, teaching them how to use English, presenting their work. But I was always looking for something more exciting. When I thought, okay, what business can I get into that I can enjoy? And the only thing I could come up was travel. So I created an ecological travel business in Mexico 10 months after arriving. Although I spoke Spanish then, I knew negotiating in Spanish was going to be very difficult. So I looked for expats living in Mexico City. I started creating my programs, places I couldn't even pronounce. And I was excited. It was the most creative time I've had at that age. It was exciting.
What was the journey into fine art?
After Mexico, I decided it was time to move. And I was offered a job in the UK, which was a fine art shipping company. And there I started working. It was only like a 9-week job, but I said, yeah, that's fine. My plan was to move to New York and go back to Canada, settle down and all that. But as soon as I got to London, the project they gave me, I helped them a lot. So they offered me a full-time position, sorted out my work permit, and stayed with the same company for over 25 years. Yes. And during that time, they moved me to New York with a carte blanche. Just fix it. It was like a college of hard knocks where there was just so many things wrong with everything that was happening there that the first thing I did was put structure. And that was from my experience when I was creating an ecological travel business in Mexico, putting structure, having your programs in place before you start business. So I implemented the same thing.
Do you have any cool art stories to go with that? Do you have one that stands out?
It's a shipping company, so we always dealt with art. We saw art up front. Once in a while, an airline would ship a painting somewhere else when it's supposed to be exhibited somewhere else. You have a client is screaming and you're trying to help them by calming them down. It was always trying to have that communication open with the client so they don't feel like they're being left out and not being heard. We had one exhibition where the painting ended up in South Korea, and it was an exhibition in New York the following day, and trying to get through customs to release the painting, to ship it back. It didn't make it in time. The client, because of that communication, he knew it wasn't our fault. So yes, there's a lot of stories that happened over the years. We installed art pieces for a garden party, and these pieces are so heavy. You've got 10 people lifting a heavy stone ball that has to sit properly in someone's garden. Yeah, there's a lot of exciting things because it's not only fine art, it's also furniture, it's installs, art Basel, art Miami. There's a lot of logistics, PR, and customer service all at the same time, and cash flow.
Wow. When you said fine art, I'm thinking like paintings or, something from a burial mound like sarcophagus. But when you're talking about, hi, I need some stone sculptures moved in here, and it's rental. That's quite the.
Yes. We shipped Rolling Stones, monkey, the big gorilla. It had to be shipped from New York to California. You get to see things up close. And the privilege of having that is exciting. You also find a lot of strange things being shipped.
What was the strangest?
A bear. It was like 10 foot, and it had to be shipped somewhere in Europe. So getting that into a crate and sending it by sea is, you couldn't air freight. It's just too big for cargo. It was a scary bear.
I'm guessing it was a statue, not a live bear.
Yeah, it wasn't a live bear. The lies are all in Canada.
Creatives usually don't like structure and systems. Tell me how you've been able to evangelize systems to creatives.
The first thing I've realized is our creatives think differently. They're not like the spreadsheet kind of people. So you have to think like them. You have to embrace their creative, the way they think. Although my program is very structured, the way I deliver it is where the game change really happens. You're delivering a system for them to do without them realizing they're actually doing the work, because we add storytelling, there's a lot of things that's added to the process of getting them to sit down and do the work and doing the work with them. A lot of them did the work away from the sessions and deliver because of the fun we had creating it.
A lot of people, I'm thinking back to different paths in my career and certain jobs. That's not a job Bernie would enjoy. Could he do it? Yes. And accounting, it's like, yeah, no. It's just because it has, and it has purpose. Don't get me wrong. I totally understand why things are structured that way. But to me, it kind of shackles me in. Why is it that systems can be actually, I know why they're good, but why can they actually be attractive? Like, what makes them sexy, so to speak? If you're the creative, what makes that brick attractive or into a 10-foot bear?
Part of the process is creating revenue streams. This is very important for creatives because they need to get paid. They need to get some money in. So you create a system that's fun. I call it eeny, meeny, miny, moe, because it's easy for them to remember which lane it falls under. We start with Ini. So Ini would be a pop shop, one-time thing. It can be, it can just be something that's a one-day event that brings in revenue. Then you fall into the 4 categories. And it's fun. They're laughing. They call you. I've got a bespoke or custom tailored project coming together. So you ask them, so what lane does that come into? And they say it's Mo, because it's more money when they get that customized work, right? So it's fun. You make it fun, but at the same time, you're teaching them about business. They get to know why it's important to have revenue streams, know your pricing, your concept, the background of why you're in business as a creative. Because I work with jewelry designers, painters, some are spiritual, some are just product-based. I work with people who do magazines and branding. It's very diverse, but they're all creatives. Following a certain system allows them to then see where they're at in their business at all times. And I make them measure where the revenue's coming in. So I think that's sexy. It's sexy to know where your revenues are coming in from. But in order to get to this part, you have to have a structure. The structure is the most important thing before you move into anything else. Then comes the niche. And you make it fun. Who's your niche? Who do you want to attract? Let's give it a name. Let's describe this person. And I'm like, oh my God, I know these people. I know who they are. They're my friends. Or I've seen this. It's fun. So they're excited. I'm excited for them. And they're excited about their business. Because at the end of the day, it's their business. But you're helping them put all that in place for them to understand their business and also get excited about it. Systems aren't boring. They're actually sexy.
Do you find you have to impose discipline or something? You hear about Steve Jobs saying real art is shit. Do you find that they fight back against the structure?
Yes, there are some who fight against the structure, but when you explain it to them in their way of thinking, they come around and do the work. The ones who are serious about running their creative side into a business do the work. Most of them do the work. Some of them you have to pull the duvet away from them once in a while. And there's a lot of mindset. There's a lot of mindset work. There's a lot of confidence building. So it's not just about building a business, it's also all that factor. Because if they have success, it's not like, yay, I'm successful. It's more like, oh my God, why me? Why me? Why do they want my work? Why do, those are their challenges that you have to be there for them. So there's a lot of mindset exercises, yes, personal, and I encourage them to read personal development books. that can feed their mind. A lot of things to get from A to B to C to D. And it has to be fun or they won't show up.
You mentioned, I know that you have in your about workplace discrimination that is something you've faced yourself. What were the outcomes for that that you realized afterwards? That how to manage it and how not to get stuck with it.
I think what happened is that it's always circumstances because I was tied to the company with my work permit initially. So you're always trying to do everything you're told. And then you develop your own, you grow up. And basically, I grew up. And then I started questioning what's not acceptable and acceptable. And I started putting boundaries. But before I got into that, before I had the realization that there are boundaries, I suffered a lot. I would go on holidays, they would hound me. If I told them where I was staying, they would call the hotel. I went to Japan. I was literally working between 10 p.m. to 2, 3 in the morning just to keep things going. It was like, what are you doing? This is your holiday. So eventually I started putting my foot down and saying, you don't have any permission to speak to me that way. So that was like, wow, that was the big thing. But the relationship changed as well. There's a little bit more respect because then I started saying yes and no, yes and no. And how did I take that into self-employment, into being an entrepreneur? I had to make sure that because I have a system in place, I have structure in place. I know when I'm going over what the agreement is. It's because I agree to it. I decide that I'm going to do it, even though it's not within the parameters of the agreement. But one of the things that I learned later on, like 2 years later, I was still taking the habits I had as an employee into my business. No one was watching me, but I felt guilty if I had to get up and go out for lunch. And then I realized, what are you doing? There's no one behind you. There's no one there. You can go for lunch if you want to start at 6 in the evening. It's okay. But that was a big breakthrough for me. That was a big breakthrough. Stop being an employee in your business. And that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, creatives who have gone from employment to self-employment. They're still carrying those habits, working 9 to 5, waiting for permission for someone to give them, waiting for valuation for somebody to say they're doing well or they're doing good. Things that happens when you're working under a manager rather than working for yourself.
It sounds like repressed memories keep surfacing.
I had to do a lot of forgiveness exercise for that.
Your bio speaks of burnout, and I hear that a lot in our listeners. Tell me how you came back from burnout. Tell me your victory story.
Yes. When I transitioned from working for a company into self-employment, your whole body just collapses. I felt destroyed, basically. I felt destroyed. I wasn't sure what I was doing anymore. All I knew was that I did not want to work for someone else. I wanted to work for myself because I knew when I created that business back in Mexico, how much joy I had. It's not easy. It's not easy being self-employed, not easy being an entrepreneur, but you get a lot out of it as well. And how I overcame that was I did a lot of spiritual exercises. I fed my mind with personal developments. I attended courses. I did a lot of things for myself. It was switching from not thinking about me to self-care. So I made sure I implemented self-care into my business as well. And not otherwise I'll work 24 hours. It's because that's the discipline I had. working for someone else. I was constantly working. That when I was working, when I transitioned, I was still had those habits. If I didn't say stop, I would continue all night. It was so bad. It's not admirable.
When you're working with people, like you just described, hi, I've gone full out, and and you stopped going, hang on, boundaries breached, and you're going through a reset. What advice would you give someone if you're thing with a creative, where they've kind of had some carnage happening, they've got a good product, they want to get there, but there has to be a reset, a rebuild. What advice would you give that person?
I would, first of all, they should ask themselves, what's the vision? What is the dream? What is the end in mind? All that. Where do you want to go? And then put structure, get a coach. A lot of people think they can do it on their own. And some parts you can do on your own, but there comes a time where you do need help. Align your vision, your processes. See where you're at. What assets do you have? What do you have in your toolkit that you can add on to what you're doing? And just go through. Now with Chat GPT can also help you, can give you the structure, the person, but there's a lot of parts where you still need someone to help you with it. And strategy, before you strategize, who are you trying to attract? What are you trying to do? A lot of creatives that I've worked with, they were selling their artwork for nothing, $10, $20, and they didn't see the value of what they were doing because they did not have that guidance to show them what's possible. And I would highly, highly recommend any creative to work with a coach. If they can't afford one-to-one coaching, they can go for group coaching or do a blueprint. Doing the blueprint just to give you a plan. And if you're able to follow that plan, do it on your own. You can then follow all the guidance from the blueprint. Otherwise, there are ways around it, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask questions. And even if it feels all muddled, just start with one thing. There's no such thing as a silly question anyway, because sometimes that one question opens everything up that makes sense to anyone.
You got a quick question. They were selling their artwork for pittance, right?
Yes.
How do you determine? Like it's easy to look back in time. If Renoir, Rembrandt, Picasso, it has value because the person A is passed and B other things are in play. How do you determine an appropriate value to something that it's creative, whether it's a soundbite, whether it's a visual piece, maybe it's a large stone marble that weighs heavy and it has to be moved around to garden parties? But how do you attribute a dollar value to a work? Because at the end of the day, yes, it can be priceless, but there has to be a financial transaction because the artist has to eat. And the people around the artist have to be paid for their services rendered into that. How do you determine a value for something?
I currently work still with a painter who creates art. So it's not a spiritual painter. She has about 300 pieces and she tries to sell them in the market. So what we did was look at the time it's taken her to create it, what the value she gives. So what is her expenses and the time, and then look at what price can she get away with selling her art piece, and why is it different from someone else's art piece? So what we did with her business is we moved a lot of her old stock to create new revenue to focus on custom art pieces. So she creates art pieces that she's happy to sell for whatever price she wants to sell. But her business is now focused on custom artwork. So somebody orders an artwork for her, she can then price it better and get a better return from it. So that's where the revenue streams come in to play, because she can do a market. When she has a market day and sells her art pieces, I always tell her it's for visibility, for people to get to know her. It's not really a business if you're not selling all your art at the market. You have to use it as visibility only, and then try to get your art out there and your name out there so people will know you do custom pieces for them.
As you're describing it, I'm thinking effort, right? So you take care of the cost to get there, plus the artist's conceptual talent. Do you ever have a point where you go rarity? What I'm getting at is this is a one-time. It's like you see that in prints, right? There's a limited edition print. They'll do
Yes.
maybe 1 out of 100 and they label it off. And apparently, if you're in the mid range, that's the sweet spot, right? So if it's number 50 out of 100, and that could be wrong. There are elements like that, or you do spin offs like Andy Warhol. You'll see his artwork showing up on T-shirts. So that's not where it originally started out on. So you can sell the licensing for that. These are the ways you capitalize on for a creative. I mean, I kind of picked a genre, so like if it's a visual, right?
Yes. What happens with a lot of, if you start creating merchandise or prints, your original artwork, to get it to the right colors on a print, there's a whole new process on that. But if that is not your business, and your business is painting because that's who you are, you wouldn't go into that. You wouldn't, and you need to, it's always better to raise your visibility before you start investing even more money into other things when your business is really your artwork. If you start selling mugs and you're carrying stock that you don't need. You don't need those. You might be able to sell a couple of trinkets in the market, but it's not who you are. Until you establish yourself that people really get to know you, then you can start charging better. That's why it's important to stick to customized artwork, commissioned work, because that's where you really get your visibility. And that's where I see the growth, rather than spending hours and hours creating artwork that sell for $20, $30 that won't. You remove the creative part because you're just doing a production on your own. So it's good to focus on. And
I understand the dopamine hit that comes in and putting out the fire. I also sense that you've taken it to the next step where you can find things before it happens and know where it's going before it gets there. Tell me more.
I call myself a firefighter in a business suit because it's having moved to New York and having to implement all the structure processes in place. It was constant chaos in the beginning. Because there was no system in place, there was no structure, and the most important thing is there was no cash flow. So every time to do something, you had to think out of the box. How am I going to meet payroll? On Friday, I've got zero in the bank on Wednesday. What do you do? You have to think, and I've resolved it every single time. Just putting a process in place, credit terms, people paying, we were doing so much work for everyone and not getting paid because there's no process in place. And for any business, whether you're an entrepreneur, small business, medium, small, or even large corporation, cash flow is very important. And then you have things like shipment didn't arrive and they're moving into the house the following day, because we also move when there's high value in someone's house. They use a fine art shipper to move their things, and it's delayed in customs. Someone forgot to release the paperwork. It's all that. Then there's the merge from the from the container line. There's all those logistics. And it's having to make sure the teams are in place to respond when all these things happen. It's really the art of thinking outside the box. It's not a quote. It's real. It's very real.
Especially when the box is at sea. You got to pay somebody to actually do the labors.
Yeah.
You mentioned you have an item that says feels like you, and you're talking about the business. What does that look like? How do you get there? Like, it's sort of like if you don't know what you want to be when you grow up type thing, right? Until you actually get there, and all of a sudden, like this. Or, you started off in Mexico doing an eco business, and then one cab ride later, you're going, I'm doing fine art between the UK and the US. How do you know that business feels like you? How do you help your clients get into that? Yeah, this is what I need to do, and not, let's say, make mugs. It's a sidebar.
Yeah. When you go on a discovery call and you ask them about their business. So they said, tell me about your business. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself that you don't normally talk about. And then they talk about their business, and I can feel whether it's a hobby or it has a future. And from there, you create the environment for them to be excited, to empower them. You empower them to enjoy and believe in what they're doing. I had one discovery call where I was like, sounds like a hobby. Great website. Wow, amazing website. Exactly what does it do? It's just pictures of food, things like that. So when I work with my clients, apart from empowering them, is having that belief with what they're trying to achieve here is really from them. You're just guiding them the right way, giving them the right support, helping them with the mindset, building that confidence. But at the end of the day, it's their business, and having that and creating that business to their personality, because that's the only way they'll be able to be successful. They're not trying to do something they're not. They're not following a cookie cutter methodology. It's very real. So I take their hand and we build their business together. I am not a teacher. I'm a business builder. So I build it with them. I get as excited as they are when they're doing it well, when they're getting recognized, when they're making money. And then it becomes more, when you start wearing that belief that your business is unique, special, then that's what I mean by helping them create their business just the way they are. So it comes naturally, it's authentic. Yeah, I get really excited about people's businesses when I could feel there's a future, and you get goosebumps.
Have you business and watched them flow and felt good about it, and you said, this is duplicatable? Why don't you put it in a franchise? Have you ever started a franchise with someone?
No, I haven't. It's the next project I had was collaboration, creating events with artists. I have a lot. It's when you're an entrepreneur, I have a team helping me. The main core of the business is me. You can only spread yourself so much. I have to make sure I'm also structured and evolving and building. But yes, the next one is community interest company, which is bringing back to the community. There's a lot of things that go through my mind. So franchise, it's a different market. It's a different ball game, isn't it?
Have you ever found that, let's say, someone is doing something totally creative, right? And let's say it's prints. They have an artwork. They themselves do not want to be the master printer and get that piece. They're into the making the beauty. That beauty can be replicated. It can be custom, but at the same point in time, though, you would hand it off to someone else going, "Hi, replicate this for me." Yeah, because you've seen that in the art world, right? And
Yes.
that's why forges are so fun to do. Said no one ever, right? But at the same time, someone wants to own an example of the art. They don't need to own the original. So that's kind of, it's almost like doing a franchise, all right? Except it's a run, whether it's a limited one, whatever the case might be. But have you ever had that experience where someone is, and I mean, I'm focusing on art, but it can be, yeah, a creative is not necessarily just limited in the lane of a painting or sculpting, yeah, or a soundbite. It could be a whole bunch of different things. But have you ever had an instance where that is, yeah, you can replicate this and you provide a license for someone to manufacture it?
No, I've never really worked. I've had clients who wanted to start printing their artwork, but then in the end, they had to focus first on the originals before duplicating their work. It goes back to visibility. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be known for? Creating prints is not just about, that's a different type of marketing. That's a different type of business. Get your business up and going, get it consistent cash flow coming in. And then when the eeny, meeny, miny, you have those, then you're able to reinvest it into your business and look at duplicating another part of. I always believe that a business should be like a tree. Then you create branches, but before you can create those branches, you have to make sure the foundation is strong. Then you can do whatever you want. When I had an ecological travel business, I used to do presentations without any paper. Like I knew I could see it in front because I had each branch represented part of ecological travel, whether it's archaeological, the food. It's Mexico offered so much. There was so many things you can do with it. But with art, it's because it's personal. Before they branch off, they have to make sure they understand their business and they have the foundation well structured and their processes in place. Then they can use the extra headspace to think of something else.
Marjorie, what's one piece of advice that you wish that you could go back and tell the young Marjorie when she started a business that you wish that you didn't have then?
The first thing is stay away being afraid of missing out. I would highly recommend really get doing a lot of research, finding the right coach for you, because we tend to just grab, oh, I need that, I need this, I need that. But when you start to think, well, what do I need? What do I want? How am I? It's really understanding the vision. Are you going to be strong enough when they're wobbly along the way? If you have a great structure in place, those wobbly times will keep you in check. It will propel you to keep going forward because you have that motivation, because you know where you're going and you know where you want to be. And that's exactly where I am. I have plan A. I don't like plan B.
Where do you see things in the next 5 years in your space for with creatives? Do you more creatives, less creatives, new types of creatives? What do you anticipate in the next 5 years in your space?
I think I would like to have a one-stop shop where people come in and different things, have an academy for youth entrepreneurs. I'm a guest lecturer at a university here in London, teaching entrepreneurship and how to build a business for MBA students. And then have a place where an academy for creatives building a business, but make it like very interactive, that they don't feel like, it's a teacher student role, but getting more involved with it and partnering with other expertise because you can't know it all. Partnering with someone who does marketing, an expert in other areas of a business that needs help, and the client coming to one place and using everything from that one place, like a one-stop shop. Collaborating with various foundations as well and with creatives, running workshops and yeah, master classes. Yeah. It's all in the works.
You've
Good.
mentioned Mexico, you've mentioned England, you've mentioned Canada. What is there a geography that you tend to like to focus on? And if this resonates with someone, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, I've got the best ways LinkedIn, through LinkedIn, by email, Marjorie at smartbusinessdesigns.com. My website is www.smartbusinessdesigns.com. And I also run a podcast. It's called Creatives in Business, which I tend to run every few weeks. I'm open. I check everything. So if you're trying to reach out, you'll find me and I'll find you.
Marjorie, I want to say thank you. And to my co-host, Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. So if you're a creative and you're going, hi, I've got the charm of making something really beautiful in life, but everything else is sideways for me, Marjorie's the lady to reach out to, and do so. If you have to move that bear across the sea, she can help.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motivateyou.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motivateyou.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert; Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host; Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space; then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner; and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.